Welcome to the podcast, Tessa. So I'm really excited to talk to you today because we actually met a few weeks ago at the Mom 2.0 Summit in Nashville. And we got chatting and we were talking about screen time and social media. And I was just like, I have to have you on the podcast because this is such good information. My kids are really young. And so, we're kind of starting to navigate what that looks like with screens and social media. And my 7-year-old or almost 7-year-old has already been asking for a phone.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, you're really young, but also I know times have changed. And so I'm just really excited to dive into the conversation today.
Yeah. And I think that what got my attention when we met at Mom 2.0 was the title of your podcast. I didn't sign up for this. Like, there's so many things in motherhood that we had no idea walking into. And even if we were warned, we probably didn't pay attention,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I will say with so much certainty that what we did not sign up for is having to figure out, as the first generation of parents, to navigate the world of screens with our kids. Like, that is definitely something that none of us signed up for when we found out we were pregnant for the first time and raising kids in today's world. Like, that was not on my radar back in 2010, 2011 when I got pregnant. And so that's what really excited me about about talking with you, is the title of your podcast, because I think that so many of us can relate to that as parents and as moms, but we also don't always know what to do.
Well, that was actually going to be the first question that I asked you, was like, what is one thing that you didn't sign up for? And so, it's just, I mean, screens is tough. My oldest, she's almost 7. She'll be 7 in October. And I mean, it wasn't even a question of, we're going to let her watch screens. Like, even from like when she was a baby, it was like, oh, we'll turn on baby first TV and let her kind of watch
Baby
it while
Einstein.
she plays. Where she's like in her, little bouncer, and she can hold her head up. So she's only like 4 or 5 months old, and she loved baby first. And, these nursery rhymes. And it wasn't even a question in my mind, like, should I really be letting her watch this or not? I have been pro screens like my whole motherhood journey. But as my kids are getting older and they're more interested in iPads and tablets and games, I've noticed certain behaviors that have made me kind of second guess, like, okay, wait a minute. It can't just be a free for all. Before we jump in, do you want to do an introduction and just let everyone know who you are and what your credentials are?
Yeah. So my name is Tessa Stuckey, and I am a licensed professional counselor. So as a therapist, I work with a lot of teenagers and a lot of parents on how to navigate raising your kids in today's world. It has turned into specifically social media and screens. I did not get into the mental health field thinking or wanting to specialize in something like that. But it kind of happens because I've been a therapist for about 10 years. So about 10 years ago, that's just what was coming to my office, was a lot of darkness that these teenagers were experiencing. And it all came back down to social media and screens. And at the time, my kids, I have 4 boys, and I had 4 under 4. So at the time my first client, I had an almost 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and twin, like 3 months. I think they were 3 months old when I started working. And so client after client after client, hearing them say things that were really concerning and not really having these go-to answers, because it all felt so new, and they don't teach you this sort of thing in grad school. I had to figure out what was happening in today's world. I could not sleep. I could not fathom the idea of raising my 4 kids in today's world if all of this darkness is coming and it was all stemming back to screens and social media. And so I went on this huge journey to figure out what was going on culturally. And so that's what I based my book off of. So I have a book called For the Sake of Our Youth. And online, I'm known as the Mom Therapist. And I talk about what I have learned with my teenage clients, how I am parenting differently because of what I learned from my teenage clients, and just the ongoing conversation of how screens and social media can be extremely harmful for our kids. Now, when I talk about screens, I am mostly not including TV. TV is a
Okay.
very passive screen time. It's more of the interactive screen time. So that's the social media, even the YouTube channels, gaming, that sort of thing. I don't love watching TV or movies on tablets because it creates kind of your family norm of having it like an ongoing entertainment thing, when you go to
Yeah.
the store, when you go out to eat, that sort of thing. But when I'm talking about screens, I'm mostly not talking about TV.
Okay, that's really helpful to know because I've noticed in my own girls with their behaviors with screens that it's so different when we're sitting down. We do Friday night movie night every
Yeah.
Friday that I have them, and we do popcorn, and it's just like this whole fun thing, right?
Yeah.
And but like it's just we go down and we just watch a movie, and then my 3-year-old, she doesn't like. She pays attention for about 20 minutes and then she's
Right.
like playing
She's
with
three.
toys or whatever. Um, but yeah, but I noticed like when they have their iPads,
Uh-huh.
and their tablets or they're playing with my phone, the behavior is a lot different. I mean, they're
Yeah.
totally zoned in.
Hmm.
They are, scrolling like we used to do YouTube Kids. We don't have it
Yeah.
anymore, but like
Yeah.
the little video, they would change the video like every 10 seconds. They
Yes.
haven't even watched the full video. So they're
Right.
just scrolling past because I think it's like an attention thing.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, my older daughter, she's playing games and those types of things, but
Yeah.
I can tell it's addictive. And trying to
Right.
take the tablets away after an hour, because we have screen time limit. So after,
Yeah.
the hour is expired, I don't ever override it.
Right.
And it's a battle. And
Yeah.
I don't get that with movies or TV when it's on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different, it affects the brain differently. And I want to also say very candidly that I was the mom that was handing my kids iPads. I mean, every time we went out to eat, every single time we got in the car, like I made sure that they were not going to throw a tantrum or have a fit or embarrass me in some way or make my anxiety go up. I always had the excuse of, oh, I have 4 under 4. Oh, I have 4 boys. Oh, it's so hard. I had that iPad charged all the time. So I
Yeah.
definitely fell into that societal expectation to have this magical device that can kind of cure any uncomfortable feeling that I would feel as a mom, but also take care of my kids' discomfort too.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until I was talking to these teenagers and then bringing those really dark and scary thoughts into my office. And then we were able to link it to how they grew up with screens and how they were able to have access to something that would create a distraction at any point. So boredom, any sort of discomfort. And so they never actually learned how to recognize their emotions and then learn how to actually regulate their emotions with healthy coping. So then what happens is that when they hit those hormonal years and they are so, I mean, do you remember the hormonal years? Like
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
those feelings are so intense, and they're feeling it hard, and they want an instant fix. They don't want to feel uncomfortable at all because they never had to growing up,
Yeah.
or they didn't have to very often. And so when they feel that heartbreak or those intense insecurities, whatever it is, they want an instant fix. And so they'll either numb out scrolling YouTube or TikTok. But when they put their phone down, they still don't feel better, or they go to the dark side, which is the really scary stuff that we don't want to happen to any of our kids.
Right.
And so it's something definitely to pay attention to. And when they are getting the difference with what you're experiencing with TV versus games or YouTube is the amount of dopamine that they're getting released in their brain
Mm.
because of those different apps.
Yeah, when does dopamine release in their brains when they're using screens?
So dopamine is a natural chemical reaction to rewarding situations. We feel little drips of dopamine, when you watch the sunrise or you hear a really pretty song or you make your bed or you finish a book, or you smell fresh baked cookies. Like dopamine, we're supposed to get little drips all the time. But when we get on our devices, so social media and YouTube or games, you get a huge dopamine dump, like immediately. Like
Yeah.
it's like the novelty effect. It's literally the same thing that happens with gambling. And so all the lights and the overstimulating of sounds and the different things, and then wanting to go to the next video, swipe, 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 you're going to
Mm.
get another dump of dopamine, another dump of dopamine. And the problem with that is that then the little drips of dopamine throughout the day don't feel joyful anymore, and you need
Oh,
another hit of the dump. So
yeah.
that's why you see
Wow.
when kids have these big tantrums or these reactions, it's because you literally just took away all of their joy, but it's an
Yeah.
unhealthy version of it.
Oh my gosh, that scares me to death.
I
And
know.
like I'm
No, I
thinking about
know.
even well, and I mean I'm a creator on social media, and so I
Right.
use my phone a lot and I
Right.
scroll. And I've noticed it even in myself. I'm 34 years old. I didn't grow up with smartphones or technology when I was a teenager, so this is
Right.
like fairly new to me. Where I feel like my brain was fully developed by the time I got to this point. But like I've even noticed in myself, like getting on social
Absolutely.
media and wanting to see like comments and like how many
Hmm.
likes did I get, and I'm an adult and it
Right.
is affecting me, and I can recognize when that's happening, but I keep
Yeah.
doing it, right? And it's like
Right.
I'll just admit that. I'll just be vulnerable that like I just do that and I know that my brain is reacting that way.
Yeah.
And so it's like how is that affecting kids who
Yeah.
their brains aren't fully developed and they're not self-aware
Right.
and they don't know what's going on. And
Yeah.
yeah, so okay, well that's a really good place to start. So
Yeah.
let's dig into this a little bit more. What are some of the risks or negative effects that you're seeing in teens when they grew up with screen time and social
Yeah.
media?
So the big one is what I was talking about, like that lack of resilience being built throughout those developmental years so that they can learn how to regulate appropriately and cope in a healthy way rather than just scrolling and numbing out. Um, but the other piece of it is a lot of and this is relevant for you and I because I'm the same. Whenever I get on social media, like I'm scrolling, I'm trying to build my platform and my brand and like get recognized and here and there.
Yeah.
Um, is so many of our kids, teenagers today, their self-worth is directly correlated with their social media presence. So how many likes they get on a photo or how many comments they get, like if they don't get a certain amount, they'll go back in there and delete it, or they'll over analyze,
Mm,
the bejesus out of it to figure out why that one didn't make it or get as many likes, how many followers they have, all of that. So all of their self-worth, if they've grown up with social media, if they get it too young, then all of their self worth is wrapped in that little device
yeah.
full of toxicities. And so it can make or break them within seconds. And if we wait a little bit to allow our kids to have social media, so what I suggest is 15, 16 years old. Usually the summer before junior year is to me like prime time. There is an emotional maturity that has developed by that time that they are ready to take on the online world. If we allow social media before that age, then even by the time that they are that age, they still haven't built the emotional maturity. It almost delays their emotional development
Mm,
so that even when they're ready to go off to college, they are still not mature enough to be online.
yeah.
So it's important to delay social media truly as long as possible for our kids, because we want their self-worth and their resilience to be strong going into the online world.
Yeah. What do you recommend as far as phones? Because I put out a video and I know that you saw it because you commented on it,
Yeah,
but I think it got over 1 million views and it,
yeah,
triggered some people, about, hey, let's make a pact and not let our kids have social media or I think I said smartphones until they're
yeah,
16 years old.
yeah,
And a common comment that, I think most people were on board. Most parents were like, yeah, let's do it. Like, but then there were some that, commented as like, well, this is a safety reason. Like, I need to be able
hmm
to get a hold of my
hmm
children,
hmm
especially when they're at school or if they're over
yeah.
at a friend's house. So, is this really specific? Would you say the 15, 16 for social media specifically, or is it for smartphones in
I would
general?
say for smartphones in general, because there are simple phones out there. So
Yeah.
I'm all about connecting and being able to communicate with our kids. I think that's important. You know, it's human nature to want to connect too. When your daughter is 10, 11, 12, she's going to want to know what her friends are doing, and I remember being that kid too. I was up late
Yeah.
on the phone, and when I was able to get instant messenger, I got that. And, it was all about the connection piece. So we don't want to hinder our kids from having the ability to communicate with others. However, if we hand over a smartphone, you're handing over the World Wide Web, unregulated. They can do anything. Even if you set up all the parameters, there's ways around all of it. And
Yeah.
so with social media and internet use, and then I always add in, gaming and stuff on phones too. You want to be really careful. And because they're so young, they don't have the prefrontal cortex development for the impulse control, for the self-regulation. So do them a favor and not even offer a smartphone until they're older, and get a simple phone. You can get, for us, we have a simple phone that is our family phone. And honestly, we use it because years ago it was sent to me. A company wanted me to test it out. And I was like, well, my oldest is 7. Like, I'm not going to give him a phone,
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh my gosh, we could use this as our house phone. So we have used it as our family home phone for 5 years now. And it's been wonderful. I've been able to teach my kids texting etiquette. They can call me for emergency when I'm at work, or grandma, fell, or whatever it is. And it's created this sense of security and independence, but in a safe way. And then when they are old enough that say they need to go to diving practice or soccer, and you need them to text you when they're done, you can still have them have that simple phone, because that's the purpose of it. You want to keep them away from the unregulated stuff. And unfortunately, social media and internet, they just are not on top of it. Big tech does not care about our kids' mental health and their well-being. And so there's just too much risk of them being exposed to inappropriate content and harmful content that it's not worth it. So definitely a simple phone. I personally like the Bark phone the most, but there's a couple on the market that are good.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about the Bark phone. And just going back to like the tech companies, and that video that I posted that went viral,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of people for some reason. Instagram was sending my video out to children. I mean, there were people who were commenting, kids who were commenting on my video because it did go viral, that were 14 years old, 16 years old,
Yeah.
and then chiming in. Obviously, they didn't agree with what I was saying, right?
Sure.
But I felt like, and then there's adults like commenting back to these teenagers, and so then I looked up. I was like, I was deleting their comments because I felt I was like, hey, I feel like it's inappropriate for them to be commenting and getting in these arguments with adults on my page.
Yes.
And then I looked up. I was like, don't they have to be like 16 or 18 years old to have an Instagram account?
Right.
And I guess it's 13.
It's 13. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And very alarming. Like,
Yes.
I wish that they would do more and do more there and require, higher ages or verification, or I don't know, but it doesn't seem appropriate.
They are somewhat working on it. It's just not a top priority, and I've been fighting this since 2015. So I've kind of been along this journey for a while now, and there are some things that are starting to happen as far as that, the age verification and that sort of thing, but not nearly enough and not quickly enough. So it's still not safe for our kids to be online at a young age. It's just not.
Yeah. And then going back to the Bark phone. So I've heard of it. I'm not personally familiar with it.
Okay, so you've never heard of Bark the program either?
No. Okay, I've just heard of like Bark phone just from that video because people were saying that's what they have. So
I discovered Bark many years ago. I love it so much, Caitlin. Like, I cannot sing enough praises for this company. Their intentions are so focused on family and kids and healthy teenagers. I love them so much, and I'm so thankful that through the years I've gotten to know a lot of the people that work at Bark now. But even before I knew them personally, I could not stop talking about Bark. So Basically they started as a monitoring program where you would get the Bark monitoring program and it would monitor all the devices in your house. And the way it would monitor is instead of blocking anything, it would send you, the parent, like red alerts, like, hey, so and so just started talking about drugs, or so and so, like this
Mm,
text came through on your son's phone and it looks like they're talking about something sexual or whatever. So it was all the things. Instead of us staying up all night going through our daughter's phone and reading all the text messages and looking at all the pictures and trying to find out what she's doing on Snapchat, it does that for you. And it doesn't send you everything you need to know. I mean, it doesn't send you everything. It sends you only the things you need to know so that you can go and have a conversation with your child, you know. So
right. Yeah.
someone's talking about something that's scary or has to do with mental illness. And so you get that ping and then you go to your daughter and say, hey, I saw that Sarah was talking about this, blah, blah, blah. So I talk a lot about the difference between privacy and secrecy. And our kids definitely deserve privacy. I think that's a human respect that we all need. Um, but it's a secrecy piece that we want to avoid with our kids.
Yeah.
And Bark does that. So then about, I want to say a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, they invented the Bark phone. And the Bark phone is just an Android phone, but with the Bark software on it.
Oh,
So
okay.
it will do the same thing. It'll send you all the red alerts, but it also, like, they can't download any apps on their end. Only you can on your from your account. So they
Okay.
can't even sneak around and get Snapchat, then go back and delete it without you knowing. That's like not
Yeah.
even an option. So it really does create this gradual entry into tech so that they learn how to use it and that they can be safe and healthy along the way.
Yeah. Okay, I
Yeah.
love that. And it does it record like their phone conversations, or does it have like if they're calling someone and maybe talking about
No.
something inappropriate, it just does it from like the texting
Yeah,
perspective?
it's
Okay.
really texting and then social media. Like it can get into all of their social media accounts and see if someone sent a picture or stuff like that. But
Okay.
no, I don't think it does any recording of the phone calls. That's an interesting question.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. And then okay, so you can have social media on the Bark phone, but you actually
Yes,
have to approve it as a
yes,
parent and they can't go in there. Couldn't they do
yes,
that from I'm not familiar with like parental controls outside of just like time limits for my
yes.
kids, and then like you have to download an app, you have to have like my Apple password, and my kids don't
Right,
know that.
right, right.
Um but isn't it the same on Apple devices where they can't download or they have to request permission or something?
So the simple answer to that is yes. The not so simple answer is yes, but there's Apple makes it really hard for parents to truly rely on their parental controls, and kids can get around Apple products way easier than Android products.
Mm,
And there's so many things with the iPhone that usually if they get a new update and they update their phone, it wipes clean the parental controls. So you have to go back in as a parent
oh,
and redo all of it. Yeah. And it's
okay. I didn't know
very
that.
frustrating. Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's very overwhelming for parents.
Yeah.
Um, iPhones and iPads, they don't really care about the parenting side.
Yeah.
It's just the consumer product. And so, um, in theory, yes, you should be able to protect. They have it set up so that you can. It's just not reliable. It's not reliable at
Okay.
all. And that's what comes to me the most from parents is I
Yeah.
thought I had everything set up with the iPhone. What's going on? I'm like, oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know someone who has a teenage daughter, and they were saying that she was somehow able to go in and like download TikTok and was on
Oh,
TikTok.
yeah.
There's a problem there. She was able to
Yeah.
download TikTok somehow and be on it all night. And somehow they
Right.
saw it on like a report, or they found out
Right.
somehow.
Yeah.
But,
They looked at her
and so I
screen
was
time and
like,
they saw,
yeah. And they were like, she was up all night. We have these
yeah.
parental controls. And it's like, how do they figure that out?
It's
Kids are
just
smart.
not reliable. Yeah. I mean, there's
Yeah.
literally TikToks and YouTube videos of
On
kids
how to do
teaching other kids how
it.
to do it.
Oh,
It's just
geez.
not reliable. But with the Bark phone, and I like even calling it the Bark phone, like it's not a Bark phone, it's an Android, it's a Samsung phone, but with
Yeah.
Bark software. So
Technology. Okay.
Your kids have technically they have a smartphone. It's just in a way that is safe and okay for them. But the kids can't get around it in any way.
Okay.
And it's 100%, I shouldn't say 100% reliable because anything can happen. But
Yeah.
in my experience with them, it's been effective all the time.
Okay, that's really helpful. And
Yeah.
then one other thing that really surprised me, I can't remember if it was you that told me this or someone else, but there's no, and maybe this varies like by state, but
Okay.
I don't think that there's any requirement, like schools don't ban phones, like smartphones.
Correct.
So it sounds
Correct.
like, yeah. So I guess my question is like, what do you think educators in schools, what's their responsibility here and helping to kind of
Hmm.
manage that, at least in an education setting?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the biggest things with smartphones on campus is the distraction piece. Kids are getting, I just read a report where they're getting like 237 notifications
Oh my God.
within one school day or something crazy on average. So, there's so many things working against our kids when it comes to technology because their brain isn't fully developed. These things are designed specifically to be addicting and they are very entertaining 24/7. You can totally zone out if you're bored at school, whatever. But then there's the distraction piece of getting snaps and Instagram notifications and texts, even from your parents, all day long. So, if anything, it's the distraction piece that I wish schools would pay attention to. But on top of that, kids are getting exposed to content on campus that is very inappropriate for, I mean, any kid, but definitely to be at school. And then they show another kid. Another thing is all the bullying. I mean, it's very easy to
Oh yeah.
record someone and then blast it on your Snapchat story and make fun of them. And so stuff like that is happening across the board. I mean, I could go on and on, girl. When I started my research and then I wrote my book was published in 2020 and I had 5 harms about social media and now I have 25 harms that I talk to parents
Oh,
about just about
yeah.
social media. And all of that is coming into school. And so in my dream world, from first bell to last bell, there's no smart devices because then you're not getting distracted, you're not being exposed to anything, and then you're also being forced to socialize. There's a lot of
Yeah.
times when you walk into schools now and the lunchroom is like silent because everyone's
Mm,
just scrolling on their phone. And
yeah.
there's so many chances there for our kids to learn social skills, to power through some of that social anxiety that's uncomfortable or deal with some drama and conflict, rather than just avoiding it by watching Netflix or TikTok or,
Yeah.
like porn in the lunchroom.
Yeah. I know as like an adult, like sometimes I'll do that. I'll walk into a room and feel uncomfortable because maybe I don't know anyone or
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. And it's easy to just like pull out your phone and not
Yeah.
and just like kind of disassociate from like the
Yeah.
environment that you're actually in, even though that's not a good
Right.
thing. And that just like breaks my heart thinking of kids doing that, especially like my own kids,
Yeah.
instead of like learning like those social skills. Going back
Yeah.
to like 2020, just such a random thought, but I feel like the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic changed a lot with
Yeah.
screens and smartphones
Yes.
because there was virtual learning and parents were
Yeah.
having to work at home while also homeschooling or being a daycare for their kids while trying to do all these things. And I know for myself, we relied very heavily on screens
Yeah.
for my 2.5-year-old at the time because I was pregnant, was working from home.
Yes.
My husband at the time was working from home, and I mean, it was. I mean, we relied on it a lot,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's gone down now that we're back to normal, like a normal life.
Uh-huh.
I feel like screen time is still very high as it was during the pandemic, even though we're in that different world.
Yeah. I mean, what a chaotic time, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when I realized that the kids weren't going back to school after spring break, like I kept holding on hope that they,
Yeah, please.
you know, wait, what
Yeah.
do you mean they're here until next school year? Wait, what?
Yeah.
And even then it was like, are they going back next school year?
Yeah.
So I will say all of my research was all of my stuff that I talked to parents about was very relevant before the pandemic. The pandemic accelerated the harms and toxicities and the need really for us to be cognizant of this 10,000 times. Like everything, video game addiction got worse, social media addiction got worse, self-harm, eating disorders, all of
Mm-hmm.
it got, anxiety, depression, all of it went sky high due to all sorts of reasons. But one of the reasons that was a pretty main culprit was the screen usage and social media usage. So, and I know for me, like we were in survival mode, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that happened for a lot of parents, but that was also the turning point where these kids who had never been addicted to, Roblox before, they were able to play all day long during the pandemic, and then now they're still addicted, and so I think it was a turning point for a lot of families, and it's high time that we kind of get back to basics and recognize how much this is affecting our culture and these kids, and make changes that are healthy for your family so that your kids can grow up and be resilient and strong and emotionally mature enough to regulate themselves without a screen just readily available for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in that same boat. I was working from home and I had 4 kids and they were having to get on Zooms with their teachers, and I'm running back and forth and trying to homeschool them and understand. Then I would finally be like, screw it, just like go watch TV for a while, or
Right.
just y'all can play Nintendo for a little bit longer today because I have stuff I have to get done and you're here all day. Um, but I had to learn how to manage that too, with the foundational mindset of I still don't want my kids to rely on screens too much. So how can
Right.
I orchestrate this new normal with screens, but in a healthy way?
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah, what would you, so kind of just going back to screen times and like young kids, like
Yeah.
babies or toddlers. I mean, obviously, like we would say, yeah, don't let your kids watch TV, your babies or your little
Uh-huh.
toddlers watch TV or have access to a tablet. But that's not always realistic for
Right.
people. Even just thinking like if they go on an airplane or
Yeah.
something and like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been that person on an airplane where your kid is misbehaving, or that person at the store and your kid is throwing a tantrum and hitting you in the face and like causing a
Yeah.
disturbance, and you feel judged, and
Yes.
and all those things. It's easy to just be like, here's my phone, watch YouTube, let me
Right.
finish my grocery
Absolutely.
shopping.
Yes.
Like I've done that before. I'm that parent. I want to have, for me personally, I want to have more structure around screens and more
Yeah.
limits around it. But I don't know if it's realistic to eliminate it.
Yeah.
So curious, like what your thoughts are around, like, first, I guess, when is like an age appropriate time to introduce screens to like
Uh-huh.
young kids in a realistic way? And
Yeah.
then what type of like boundaries or guidelines do you recommend for young kids, like with screens?
I need to make sure I make a note because I don't want to forget one of my points. I'm going to
Okay.
answer your questions and
Yeah,
then I
you're
have
good.
some points.
Yeah, yeah.
So, to introduce screens, what I talk to parents about is introduce screens by showing them you using screens. So, TV is one thing, but I'm talking about like when you pick up your phone, you start to narrate, oh, mom has to check her email really quick. And then you can even like show them something cool on your phone and that sort of thing. I would say that's like the first step of introducing screens to them, is modeling the appropriate behavior. But then talking about the idea of them being on screens can look very different. And these are some of the boundaries. I would say there's 2 main goals that I have for the young families, and that is to allow your kids to be bored. They don't need ongoing entertainment. They just don't. It is really hard to go to the store when they are throwing fits, and or go out to eat when they're throwing fits, but you want them to be able to eventually do that without something that's just, numbing them or hushing them up. And so you
Yeah.
have to go through those struggles, and so boredom and the ongoing and avoiding the ongoing entertainment. The second piece is for parents to learn how to struggle through our own discomfort. It's not like we were saying, it's not fun when your kid is hitting you in the face
Yeah.
and throwing a fit and you're just trying to check out at the checkout. That's not fun at all. However, it probably is going to happen a few times because they are toddlers or young kids, and you have to find a way to be somewhat comfortable with that if you cannot be comfortable with that, then you have to rearrange your whole schedule and only go to the grocery store, when you don't have your kids or when your husband is home at night, or start ordering your groceries or something. But
Yeah.
you're going to have to expose them to the real world without a screen anyway. And so I like the idea of challenging parents to just get out there, go do it, like struggle through that 30 minutes of them screaming and you're feeling anxious and uncomfortable, because it's the best thing that you can do for your kids and it's the best thing you can do for yourself as a parent. And then you get in that car and you have a serious conversation about why that behavior was not okay and what are we going to do next time. So a little bit of a different approach with the behavioral side, instead of just relying on the screen to kind of just hush them up so you can get through that grocery
Yeah.
trip really quick. But the other piece that we really, really need is, which is good to keep talking about this, is that we need society to start backing us up on this and to provide a little bit of support and not make those judgmental eyes while they're waiting behind us, not scuffing because we're taking so long because our baby is throwing a fit. Like, we need more people within our culture to be comfortable in the uncomfortable too,
Yeah.
to help us get through that. I refuse to give my kid a screen, especially when they're throwing a fit, because that's going to almost entice that behavior.
Right.
And so, but I need the lady behind me in the checkout line to not be being
Yeah.
judgmental and rude and trying to hurry us up. You know what I mean? So
Right.
there's
Yeah.
more of like that societal support that we need, but we can't always get that, right? So we
Yeah.
have to be confident in our decision as a parent. And so we want to help our kids build resilience, and that means we have to struggle through the uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and I think about it like this, like, I mean, I've been guilty of like doing like rewards and bribes
Yeah,
and those types of
sure.
things with my kids. Like, I'll give you like a sucker if you get in the car and stuff. It's like
Yeah,
what when you do it with screens, it's almost like encouraging that type of behavior,
yeah,
because they're ultimately getting something that they want and getting like those dopamine hits, right? If you give
yeah,
them
right.
a device. And so really thinking about that is just encouraging a behavior that you probably don't want them to
So there's
exhibit
a
the next time.
difference. Yeah, there's a difference between bribing and positive reinforcement, right? So like your daughter is throwing a fit in the store and you're like, if you walk out of here quietly, get in the car, I will give you a lollipop, right? That
Hmm.
would be a bribe, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's needed sometimes. Don't get me
Right.
wrong.
Yeah.
But but a positive reinforcement is recognizing that your child is acting just mediocre, just okay. They're not doing anything wrong, and you praise that behavior. And
Mm.
so we're praising the okay behavior and the good behavior. Like, you just walked out of the store so well, and you held my hand the whole time, and you were such a good listener. I cannot wait to give you a lollipop when we get to the car. You know,
Oh, yeah.
so it's that way of rewarding with positive reinforcement, rather than, please, can you just do this for me and I'll give you whatever you
Yeah.
want. That's the difference with bribing and positive reinforcement.
Okay.
Definitely with screens, because they are so addictive and it's such a slippery slope. I suggest to parents to never put that on the table for even positive reinforcement. Even when they're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you've been acting so good today, you're going to get extra screen time. I still don't like that. And
Yeah.
my husband and I, we were very guilty of doing that with the boys for a while, of like, hey, if you guys help us clean up this morning and you get your chores done and you're all getting along, we'll give you extra time on the Nintendo. But
Yeah.
inevitably, it always backfires. And there's just this slippery slope with it that we just stay away from that altogether now. Not
Yeah. Yeah.
Nintendo. Our kids still play Nintendo from time to time.
Yeah.
We stay away from using it as a positive reinforcement.
Yeah. So can I ask, what are your boundaries
Yeah.
and screen time limits with your family?
So none of my kids have personal devices. Um, I'm not a fan of tablets. I think that they're just basically big smartphones, and so that makes me nervous. And since I have that anxiety about it, I would just rather not. So the only personal devices my kids have is my two older boys, who are 13 and 11, have the Bark phone that stays in the same place every day. They don't bring it to school. They're allowed to use it to text a friend here and there. They don't have any apps on it other than texting and calling. And then we have the family phone that anyone in the family can use, and it's really great for when I'm at work and they need to call me to ask where, I put something or whatever. And then we have the Nintendo Switch that comes out every now and then. Usually it's not an every day, definitely not an every day. It's not even an every weekend thing. It's just when we first got it, they were very obsessed with it, rightfully so. It's this
Yeah.
new thing and it's built for kids to be addicted to. And so we had to kind of struggle through, them asking every single day, every weekend, when can we play Nintendo, that sort of thing. But we've got a good rhythm now. So they play, if they get to play Nintendo, they each get 30 minutes and like that's it. Like that's it. There's,
Yeah.
occasionally if I really need to get something done and they've been behaving well, I'll be like, y'all go ahead, have 10 extra minutes. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
But they're at ages now that I'm comfortable with bending that a little bit. When they were younger, I did not bend ever. I needed them to know that what I said was going to have a follow through. I didn't want to give any mixed messaging. So you have to be really careful with that when they're young. So that's basically it. We have TVs, we have 3 TVs in the house, in the game room and 2 downstairs. And that's really it. We have YouTube on one TV and it's password protected. So they have to ask permission to get on YouTube, and it's in the main living space so I can hear everything and see everything they're watching. And no, they're not at this age yet, but when they do get older, there will be no devices in bedrooms. That won't be allowed.
Yeah.
Because that's where, when the doors are closed, that's where things might be seen and get clicked on more often. And we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to hold off social media for a while.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
Has your oldest been asking about social media, or some of his friends on social media, or have smartphones? Like, I think that there's like this thing, it's like FOMO, right? Like
Right.
fear of missing out. Like
Sure.
especially if like all your friends are like socializing on Snapchat or whatever, and you feel that you're not included because you don't have it. Has that come
Yeah.
up?
So I will say with my 13-year-old, it has not come up. He is definitely my rule follower who,
Yeah.
I've been talking about this since he was 4 years old. So all of
Okay.
my kids, I mean, it's part of it feels like a daily conversation, but they know
Yeah.
where mom and dad stand on this, and like it's not
Yeah.
going to happen anytime soon. So my 13-year-old, he's more of kind of like, well, mom said no, so like it is what it is. His friends don't really have it. Some of them play video games and want him to get on, because that happens a lot with teenage boys, is they play video games and they FaceTime each other while they're playing.
Yeah.
And they ask him, but he doesn't engage in that really. My second son, who's 11, his friends, so he's in 5th grade, so his friends do have Snapchat and TikTok and all this stuff. He's never asked me for it. We have open conversations all the time. Really and truly, the most important piece is to have a good relationship with your kid. No matter how old they are, what they're asking for, you want them to feel comfortable to be like, Mom, this kid showed me something on the bus and it scared me, and now I don't feel like I can fall asleep, or whatever it is. And so he hasn't asked for it. I'm sure he would love to get it. But the FOMO piece that you're talking about is very real. But FOMO is not new. I'm 100% sure you have felt FOMO at some point in your life, right?
Yeah.
And so especially when we were younger, like I didn't want to miss out on anything. I didn't want to be left out. Like that's a horrible feeling. It's not a good feeling. However, and this is what I tell parents all the time, social media or not, it's inevitable to be left out. It is inevitable for our kids to have FOMO, whether they're missing out on some group Snapchat text or they're missing out because they have to go to grandma's dinner rather than to the party, So what I try to make very clear to parents is that they're going to be left out. They're going to have FOMO regardless, because that piece is inevitable. But the stuff that comes with social media at young ages is truly so toxic that they actually, if they get social media, they're actually going to experience FOMO more often, because they're going to actually be seeing their friends out and about, or someone's going to post a picture or a video and not tag your daughter because they are being mean or whatever it is. Or with
Yeah.
Snap Maps, you can see where your friends are and you're like, why are Madison and Hannah together? And they didn't even tell me they were getting together, you know? And so FOMO actually accelerates and gets much more relevant in their lifestyle when they get on social media. And not to say that it's easy when they're not on social media, also, like it's just easier than when they get
Yeah.
on social media.
Yeah.
So it's a battle for sure. But my kids, I think they know not to ask. And this is what I hear from a lot of parents is that after a while, they stop asking because they already know the answer. You know,
Yeah.
I would be shocked if my kids asked me for Snapchat or TikTok because we have ongoing conversations about it all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard though.
Yeah. I like the point that you make that like it's going to make FOMO worse because
Yeah.
that is so true. It will.
Mm-hmm.
And then you like start
Absolutely.
comparing yourself and thinking your friends are doing all these things without you.
Yes.
And
And that they
yeah.
live this
Yeah.
fabulous life. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember, and I mean, I will just say this, when I was 25, I had my first son, and I remember, at 2 a.m. breastfeeding him while scrolling Facebook, and all of my friends are like going on these amazing trips to Greece and bachelorette parties and all these amazing things and making so much money. And here I was like, oh my gosh, like 2 a.m. feeling so overweight because I just had a baby.
Yeah.
And I'm mad at my husband because he's snoring in the other room. And like all my friends are having so much fun. And that was me as a full grown adult, And
Yeah.
so imagine being 12. How can you
Right.
not be affected by that? So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great point. So the other thing that question on, so I know you don't let your boys have their two oldest have their phones at
mhm,
school. Do you have like another
mhm.
way to like track them? Because I know that's like a common thing is like, oh, I want to see where my kids are. If there's
Right.
like a safety issue at school, like,
Sure.
I want to be able to get a hold of them. Are there other
Yeah.
devices that you would recommend if there are parents out there that are worried about that?
Right. So one of the reasons they don't take their phones to school is because where we live, kindergarten through sixth grade, they're not allowed to have phones on campus anyway. They
Okay.
can
Yeah.
have them hidden in their backpack if they absolutely need it, but they can't bring it out on campus at all. Like even if the bell has rung and they bring it out, they'll get in trouble. Um, and I guess we have built up pretty, I guess, like old school thinking, like when you and I were, 10, 11, 12, like how would we get a hold of our mom? We would ask the school if we could call our mom or
Yeah.
ask a friend's mom if we could use their phone. That I think that's the case with my kids. So they really don't have like something with them all the time so that they can text me or call me. But what I suggest to parents is one is to build that. Like it's important for our kids to build that autonomy and independence where they have to like problem solve a little bit and critical thinking without you. But if you absolutely want them to have a device, and I can respect that, especially with divorce situations or
Yeah.
separations, when you want to know that the dad picked them up or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or they can have a chance to call you while they are at dad's house for the weekend. I like the Gab watch. It's really good. So Gab is another
Okay.
simple phone company, and they have a simple phone, and that's actually the one that we have for our family phone. And they have a Gab watch too for kids, and
Okay.
it's just call, text, and GPS, so you can track them and you can call or text them, and it's a really great device for kids.
Let's say that parents listening to this podcast want to start enabling boundaries and more
Hmm.
structure around screens, but it's kind of been
Hmm.
a free for all up until
Yeah.
this point. What tips do you have for them to kind of start this journey?
So depending on the kid, but mostly depending on age. So I would say if they are like fourth grade and under, go ahead and take it away. Cold turkey. Like they will be okay. There will be a few days that will suck, and you will get pushback. There's no doubt about that. But if you really want to just kind of eliminate it and take it off the table, which is a good approach because there's no chance of that slippery slope happening and you get relieved of that overwhelming, like I have to stay on top of all these different devices and make sure I'm monitoring them and keeping them safe. If you feel comfortable, just take it all off the table as an option. It's okay to do that around those ages, especially if they're really young. I mean, if
Mm,
they're still, toddlers or 4 or 5 years old, just do it. It's similar to, I remember when my son, his behavior was so rough, and I was looking into all like the yellow five and the red dye, and
Yeah.
how that was
Yeah.
affecting him. And so like one day it was like we didn't have goldfish and Eggo waffles anymore. And it sucked. He didn't like that because he was used to that. So he had an appropriate reaction. But it was only a few days of that. And then it was the new norm. So you want to create a new norm. And so what I tell parents is, what do you want that new norm to look like? And it might mean stripping away all of the screens, and then you build back that independence and that gradual introduction into screens, where they only are using the family computer for schoolwork, but then they don't have an iPad. It would depend on what the family's goals are. But if they're older than fourth grade, then a lot of times you have to kind of sit down, make a plan. You want to have replacement activities ready to go. You want to have conversations with them before you make this change, of letting them know, I've learned a lot about how this isn't good for your brain and this isn't good for your heart. And I did not know this whenever I was giving you a phone or I was giving you an iPad, and I know now. And so we're going to make some changes, and I know you're not going to like it, but in the long run, they will be happy about it, really and truly. And I hear from kids across the board, all different ages, how much they appreciate when their parents do set those boundaries. And so
Yeah.
I have a nonprofit, and this is our main area of focus, is helping families with developing customized family plans for their screen usage, whether that means they do want to have gaming in their life, or they want to get rid of even TV. Like, we help them get to where their goals are as a family so
Mm.
that their kids can be mentally strong and healthy through the process.
I love that. What's the nonprofit called? I want to link it
It's
in the show notes.
Yeah, it's called Look Up Nonprofit. And so we help families understand the harms of screen usage, avoid and preventative care for families that are young, but also help families kind of reset their boundaries as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot because I like having more of a customized approach, because I do think everyone's situation is just slightly different and what they're comfortable with. But
Yes,
I think the most important thing is that people are just aware and educated, and then can make an informed
absolutely.
decision that's right for their family.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. Yeah, I know we're over on time. I'll just ask you one question. This is just a personal question
Yeah.
for me with screen usage. We have a couple trips coming up. I have
Uh-huh.
been like pulling back on screens and tablets a lot since Nashville after we talked. But
Hmm.
we are going on a trip, and it's like a 5 hour drive. And then we're going
Yeah.
on a 10-hour flight in June. What would you recommend for me as far
So
as,
I
should I
would
just let them free
say
for all, or
no.
no? Okay. I knew
You
you were
can
going to
do
say
it
that.
without, yeah, I know, right? You can do it without the free for all for sure. First of all, like, you have to mentally prepare yourself I mean, as parents, we have to mentally prepare ourselves for all sorts of things. But anything like that, you're going to have to take care of your own self-care,
Right.
you're going to have to keep your mental health, stable and be comfortable and content, so that you can be available for them. So, I mean, first and foremost, moms and dads too, but since we're both moms have got to take care of ourselves. And that's beyond the occasional bubble bath with a wine glass or getting a massage. It is
Right.
truly prioritizing your emotional hygiene on a regular basis so that when things get bad, like, you've got it. You are emotionally strong and you can handle that. And that can be for another podcast episode, because I have a whole exercise for moms and how they
Okay.
can achieve that. But the second piece is what are your goals? Like, you want them to not whine or throw a fit. You want them to not make the drive. Let's talk about the 5 hour drive. The five
Yeah.
hour drive miserable. But I would really and truly strongly suggest no games on that 5 hour trip, just
Okay.
movies. Use those
Okay.
tablets and let them watch movies. That is totally fine. Let them take breaks. Tell them, I don't want your eyes to fall out of your head by staring at that screen too long. So like, let's play a little game in the car, or we can listen to an audiobook, or why don't you take a nap,
Okay.
that
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
thing. So create a little bit of balance in that 5 hour trip. So it's not only watching a movie or two or three, but also have that ready to go, like,
Yeah. Okay.
and you can have them like pick which movies you want them to have available to them and lock down everything else. So I would
Okay.
suggest for that 5 hour trip, you're mentally strong and you've got some movies ready to go. And if you want to play, I Spy or whatever, I also like to get, depending on if my kids are car sick or not, because I have two that get car sick, coloring books and little things that they can do in the car if they do get bored,
Yeah.
things that they can play with, that sort of thing. But I would break it up so that it's like, okay, now we're gonna, your movie's over. Okay, great. I've been wanting to play a game with you guys. Let's see how many, trees
Yeah.
we can find that are taller than buildings or whatever it is,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
For the 10-hour flight, again, you have got to make sure that your self-care is
I'm
like,
scared.
yeah, like I hear you. I would be nervous about a 10-hour flight, and mine aren't even that little anymore.
Yeah.
So definitely I would say again, those movies are ready to go. Depending on like, I know we stay away from all games. So like that would not be an option for a 10-hour flight for me and my kids. But I know that's not the case for every family. So you have to figure out what you're comfortable with them doing and just know that it's going to create that dopamine effect. Like you
Yeah.
have to prepare yourself for the withdrawal part too,
Okay.
And I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot to think about with that. The jet lag and time
I know.
change, and are they going to
Yeah.
sleep on the plane? There's a lot for you to consider. And so I would not blame you for letting them play the occasional game. I just would be very cautious. So what we do with flights is we don't do any entertainment while waiting for the flight
Okay.
because we kind of want to save all that for when we're up in the air.
Right.
So
Okay.
kind of challenge them to get through the boredom of, I love traveling for kids because there's so much waiting around, right? And so
Yeah.
you can sit there and like, y'all are standing there waiting, or you found your gate, and you're waiting to be boarded. And you just sit there and praise them like, oh my gosh, you are doing so good. I know we have to wait so long and you're doing so, so good. I can't wait to get on the plane with you and we can get comfortable and then we'll put your favorite movie on, that
Okay.
sort of thing. And
Yeah.
if you feel comfortable with the games, just know that it's a slippery slope and that they're going to want
Yeah.
it a lot and you're going to
Yeah.
have to battle that piece of it. It's not the
Yeah.
worst thing you can do for your kids. And sometimes you have to do it for survival, but I would try really hard to avoid the games if you can.
If I can. Okay. We'll
Yeah.
see how the drive goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've done this drive before and has been my goal in the past is like
Yeah.
hold out on screen as long as possible.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll like take a little nap or whatever. But if they start
Yeah.
getting antsy and whiny, that's usually when I'll
Yeah.
be like, okay, we'll turn like a movie on or here's your tablet. So we'll
Yeah.
see the drive goes. And then but those are all really good things to consider for that flight. I
Yeah.
don't want them to be like overstimulated and then not
Right.
sleep the whole flight.
Right.
And then it's a
Right.
nightmare because they're overtired. We're in a different time
Yes.
zone.
Oh my gosh, it's
That would be
horrible.
worse. So
Yes.
definitely some things to consider.
Always remember that your kid's emotional reaction to something is natural and it's okay. Our kids can have emotions. They can have moments when they're sad or mad. It's how they respond to it and how we want to teach them to respond to it. So you can recognize the emotion happening behind maybe the tantrum or the bad behavior and validate that.
Before I let you go, will you let
Yeah.
everyone know where people can find you?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, Tessa Stuckey, it's with an EY.com. And on Instagram, I'm the mom therapist. Same with Facebook, I think. I can't even remember now. And then my nonprofit is lifeisoffline.com.
Awesome. And I'll link everything in the show notes as well. So thanks so
Awesome.
much for joining us today, Tessa.
Yeah, thank you for having me.